The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are now entering the hottest political talk show on the planet. Welcome to the Stone Zone. Well, newly released audio is raising fresh questions about former President Joe Biden's handling of classified information and his fitness for office. Nearly 3 hours of recorded conversations between Biden and his ghostwriter, Mark Zwanitzer, conducted while drafting Biden's memoir, Promise Me Dad, revealed that Biden appeared to understand that he was discussing sensitive material, at least at some level. Remember, I think this is a point many are missing, these conversations were 7 years ago. In November 3rd, 2016, interview, while still serving as vice president, Biden said, "This is classified." In another conversation on April 24th, 2017, he warned his ghostwriter, "Some of this may be classified, so be careful with it." House Judiciary Republicans noted that the recordings were obtained lawfully through the Trump administration and the Justice Department. Tapes were reviewed during Special Counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Biden's handling of classified documents. Hur's report concluded that Biden read classified notes to his ghostwriter nearly word for word on at least 3 occasions. Yet Hur declined to prosecute, citing concerns that a jury would view Biden as an elderly man with a poor memory. Now these newly released audio recordings are shedding further scrutiny on Democrats who at the time attacked Special Counsel Robert Hur, calling him a Republican and saying that his report was political. Recognize that all this is happening at the same time that the Biden Justice Department was seeking to charge Donald Trump for the retention of classified documents, which under the Presidential Records Act he was entitled to retain and to declassify at any time. Robert Hur was appointed in 2023 to investigate Biden's handling of the classified documents after his vice presidency. Again, his investigation concluded that Biden had retained classified material, but recommended against criminal charges, writing that the jury would view him as a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The language immediately drew fierce attacks from Democrats. Then Vice President Kamala Harris called Hur's characterization inaccurate and inappropriate. The way the president's demeanor is in that report was characterized could not be wrong on the facts. Well, it turns out that Harris was entirely wrong based on the transcripts released today. She also described the report as clearly politically motivated. Congressman Dan Goldman, soon to be a former congressman because he was defeated for renomination, accused Hurd of improperly editorializing. What everyone will soon see is that this is a Republican special counsel who completely went out of his way to editorialize, to include material in his report that is unnecessary and irrelevant to what he was tasked with doing, Goldman said. Wrong. Then, of course, Pencil Neck himself, Congressman now Senator Adam Schiff, smeared Hur as a hack, claiming that the report was political. In fact, Hur's appointment was nonpartisan, and Hur is not a Republican. For it is amazing here because there is a historical precedent, of course. When it was learned that Richard Nixon's White House conversations had been taped, Nixon went to the Supreme Court in an attempt to block release, and the court voted against him 9-0. But the more fundamental question here is if Joe Biden was too mentally unstable in 2023 to be prosecuted, how was he mentally stable enough to be president of the United States? The tapes bring deep concerns about the two-tier justice system, one standard for Democrats and the other for their political opponents. I think Biden deserves to be prosecuted, and his lack of mental fitness is no excuse for him to skirt justice. But you'll remember that personalities like CNN's Jake Tapper savagely attacked Lara Trump when she raised the question of Joe Biden's fitness. Now, Joe Biden's mental fitness is there for all to see in these recordings. President Trump is making clear that America's alliance with Israel remains strong, but American policy will still be made in Washington, D.C., not Jerusalem. Ahead of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's White House visit, President Trump pushed back against Netanyahu's opposition to a possible U.S. sale of F-35 fighter jets to Turkey. President Trump said on Air Force One, "Nobody tells me what we should be selling or not." The message is unmistakable that Israel may be America's closest partner in the Middle East, but even close allies do not get to dictate U.S. foreign policy. President Trump also reminded reporters that Israel relies heavily on the American military and diplomatic support. This is not in any way an abandonment of Israel. It's actually just a statement of reality and a warning that the relationship must serve America's interest as well as Israeli security. I am for both. At the same time, President Trump said Washington and Jerusalem remain largely aligned on Iran despite some differences over diplomacy. President Trump believes pressure created by American action has brought Tehran back to the negotiating table, while Netanyahu has generally favored a harder line. This is authentic America First leadership. Trump supports Israel, confronts Iran, and recognizes Turkey's strategic importance, but he refuses to become captive of any foreign government's agenda. For too long, Washington politicians have confused alliances with blank checks. President Trump understands the difference. A strong president can stand firmly behind Israel while still telling Netanyahu no when necessary. Friendship does not require submission, and alliance does not erase American sovereignty. Israel is our greatest ally, who we must remain allied with in the promotion of Western civilization and with the shared goal of eliminating Muslim terrorism. But Donald Trump was elected to put America first, and, well, that's exactly what he is doing. Meanwhile, President Trump is demanding answers about America's childhood vaccination scandal and the sharp rise in autism diagnoses, questions the political and medical establishment too often dismisses at the behest of Big Pharma instead of investigating openly. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump has repeatedly pressed Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to examine whether the number or timing of childhood vaccinations deserves greater scrutiny. President Trump has also urged officials to make reducing autism rates a priority. The concern here is understandable. Federal data cited in the report showed autism diagnoses rising roughly from 1 in 150 to 2000 to about 1 in 31 8-year-olds in 2022. Better detection may explain part of that increase, but parents deserve rigorous research, not ridicule, censorship, or automatic appeals to authority. The White House says families worried about soaring autism rates have long ignored, mocked, and promises to pursue gold standard science. HHS similarly says it will investigate the root causes of autism and other chronic childhood diseases using evidence-based research. Mainstream studies have not established that vaccinations cause autism, but there has been a great deal of suppression on the issue, with Big Pharma standing to lose billions if the truth were to be uncovered. A promulgated scientific consensus should never shut down legitimate questions about dosage, scheduling, side effects, or conflicts of interest. President Trump's position and that of RFK is not that America should abandon medicine. It is that public health officials must earn trust through transparency, independent research, and honest debate. The Trump administration is finally restoring that after decades of decay. Skepticism of the big pharma-driven status quo is far from reckless. In fact, it is responsible leadership. Meanwhile, Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell says he remains unable to return to work after more than a month after a June 14th fall sent him to the hospital and then into rehabilitation. In a statement, the 84-year-old senator said he's undergoing intensive physical therapy and will miss Kentucky's annual Fancy Farm picnic. His doctors say he is not medically cleared to leave rehabilitation or to return to his Senate office. Now, this raises an obvious question Washington too often refuses to ask. If McConnell cannot physically perform the job, why is he still holding it? McConnell has already announced that he won't seek re-election in 2026, but his term continues while Kentucky is represented by a senator who's been absent for weeks and remains unable to resume his normal duties. His office says he continues monitoring Senator business and issuing statements, but all of this could be an elaborate cover-up meant to prevent a special election or appointment from being held. This is also seriously shortchanging the voters of Kentucky. Look, Kentucky elected a senator expected to appear, vote, debate, and represent the state's interests in person as an active participant. Mitch McConnell's latest health crisis follows years of public concerns, included repeated falls and highly visible episodes in which he appeared to freeze while speaking to reporters. The propping up of McConnell by the Republican establishment shows that they're no better than the Democrat establishment, what they did throughout Joe Biden's presidency. We talked about that at the beginning. The Republicans need to sharply rebuke this troubling trend of protecting powerful incumbents long after they've lost their ability to serve. This is not about disrespecting McConnell's age or his medical condition. He should be allowed to live his golden years in peace, comfort, and around loved ones. But when a senator is medically unable to do the job for an extended period, resignation should be the responsible course. Kentucky deserves full representation, not an indefinite absentee arrangement managed by staff and political insiders. Public office is not a lifetime entitlement. McConnell's conditions made it abundantly clear that it's time for him to step aside. In the meantime, we're watching the Senate continue to backpedal over passing the Save America Act. At least 3 senators think the U.S. Senate should stay in session, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune seems bent on leaving for vacation without acting on the single most important piece of legislation, one that would simply require that one be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a federal election and one have a photo ID in order to do so. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Please, whatever you do, don't go away, because we'll be right back with more Hot Politics.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. As Americans watch our cities decay under decades of Democrat governance with rising crime, open disorder, failed soft-on-crime policies, flock cameras are being floated as the plausible solution. These automated license plate readers have proliferated by the tens of thousands across the country, often installed with little public notice or debate. So what began as a quiet expansion has now triggered a widespread and growing backlash. That backlash is far from irrational. It's the natural response of free people who recognize a fundamental threat to their privacy rights when they see one. 2 prominent Tennessee Republicans are raising alarms over the rapid expansion of these automated license plate reading technology cameras, which are proliferating across the country, warning that the growing network of surveillance cameras could erode America's privacy without adequate legal safeguards. Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs and Congressman Tim Burchett, who joined us here in the Stone Zone only days ago, are both calling for action as Flock's safety automated license reader, or ALPR cameras, continue spreading across Tennessee and across the country. Mayor Jacobs, in an interview, said, "I appreciate Congressman Burchett's effort to bring attention to this issue to the national level. As technology advances," he said, "we need to make sure the rules and regulation surrounding these devices keeps up and continues to protect the rights and liberties of our people." The concerns come as flock safety has rapidly grown into one of the nation's largest providers of this technology. The company's cameras are marketed as crime-fighting tools that can help law enforcement locate stolen vehicles, identify suspects, and assist in criminal investigations. However, citizens and government officials are skeptical that the expanding network amounts to mass surveillance of ordinary Americans who are not suspected of committing any crimes. In Tennessee, the mayor is urging county officials to reject the deployment of the flock cameras altogether. In a video statement posted Monday, he argued that today's AI-powered license plate readers go far beyond the older systems that merely photographed license plates for short-term law enforcement use. While license plate readers have been around for a while because of AI and vastly increased networking and data retention capabilities, these flock cameras have capabilities that were never imagined in the past. The data is stored in a searchable database for sometimes up to a month or more, depending on the policies of the particular agency or jurisdiction. Congressman Burchett has announced legislation to ban the cameras. His forthcoming legislation would seek to put limits on the use of this surveillance technology. We've got to keep our country safe, said Congressman Burchett. What we can't sacrifice is the freedom, of course, that defines us. Burchett said in a video he posted to X, it is, and he's right about this, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Burchett has introduced H.R. 9800 to Congress. That was on July 21st. It's called the Protection Against Mass Surveillance Act, which would prohibit federal agencies from purchasing, using, accessing, or contracting for widespread surveillance technologies. It would also bar state, local, and federal government from using federal funds to acquire or operate those systems. Burchett claims that the cameras violate our constitutional rights and force Americans to choose between safety and liberty. He explains that law enforcement and intelligence agencies should have tools to address threats by taking our constitutional rights is not on the table. Trust but verify, he said, quoting Ronald Reagan. This legislation, of course, will hopefully restore the constitutional balance between national security and individual liberty. Look, as a conservative, this is Big Brother writ large. I don't like real ID. I don't like the idea of a huge government-based database that has information on every American citizen, whether it's by Palantir or some other vendor. And I think it is time to ban these flock cameras. Shout out to my good friend Congressman Tim Burchett, who's appeared here in the Stone Zone many times for this legislation. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. I don't believe that Mayor Mamdani has any place at the September 11th memorial this year or any other year. The 25th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks is not a political rally, a campaign opportunity, or a stage upon which ambitious political officials can rehabilitate their reputations. It's a sacred day of remembrance dedicated to the nearly 3,000 innocent Americans murdered by Islamic terrorists, the first responders who ran towards the flames while others fled, the military men and women who answered the nation's call in the wars that followed, and the families whose lives were forever shattered. That day belongs to them. It does not belong to politicians whose public record demonstrates repeated sympathy for those connected to the very ideology that produced the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. Yesterday, Mayor Zoran Mamdani stood firm at a press conference and announced that he would attend the official commemoration. That decision is an act of extreme cruelty towards the city he governs and towards every family still carrying the weight of that clear September morning. Even entertaining the idea of his presence at the memorial or among the survivors and the bereaved shows a complete absence of basic human decency. The growing petition urging organizers to exclude him from the 25th anniversary ceremony is not motivated by religious prejudice, political partisanship, or personal animosity. It reflects something far more profound. Survivors of the attacks, relatives of those who never came home, retired police officers, firefighters, emergency medical personnel, and ordinary New Yorkers understand that September 11th is about remembering those who suffered unimaginable loss. It is not compatible with elevating a public official whose own record repeatedly displays astonishing indifference towards that suffering while extending understanding, admiration, or political solidarity towards those associated with the attack. I say he should not attend. Meanwhile, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is warning that President Donald Trump's America First immigration policies could create labor shortages, an argument that simply does not hold water when viewed by the American people. The Chamber of Commerce is urging Congress to protect migrants enrolled in the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS program, after the Trump administration moved to end protections for people from more than a dozen countries. Business groups claimed construction, hospitality, manufacturing, and caregiving would lose workers. But that is, of course, precisely the point. Those workers should be sent back and replaced by Americans at better wages. The Temporary Protected Status program was created as a temporary humanitarian program, not a permanent labor pipeline for corporations seeking cheap, dependable foreign workers. When an emergency designation continues year after year, temporary loses its meaning, and immigration policy becomes driven by corporate employers rather than the national interest. That's a big part of why we're in the crisis we find ourselves in today. The Chamber's complaint follows a familiar pattern. The organization has repeatedly opposed major parts of President Trump's agenda, including tariffs intended to protect American industry and tighter immigration rules. Now it suggests businesses cannot survive without workers whose temporary permission to remain has expired. That concern ignores Americans' push out of the workforce, wages held down by abundant labor, and employers' responsibility to recruit, train, and fairly compensate citizens and lawful permanent residents. A business model dependent upon endlessly renewed emergency status is not a national workforce strategy. It's a way to enrich corporatists while chipping away at the demographic integrity of our country. President Trump is right to restore the rule of law and insist that temporary programs remain just that, temporary. Congress should focus on secure borders, lawful immigration, higher wages, and opportunities for American workers, not another carve-out demanded by Washington's corporate lobbying establishment. Chamber of Commerce calls it a labor shortage, but common sense Americans say that is exactly the point. Let corporations bid up labor for Americans. That's the way it should be. Meanwhile, a new report is raising serious questions about who may be financing the radical protest networks that have disrupted highways, occupied campuses, and openly promoted anti-American revolutionary politics since the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel. The Network Contagion Research Institute says that the Berkeley-based Middle East Children's Alliance, or MECA, has effectively served as a financial bridge, actually, between major progressive donors and organizations with alleged ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The PFLP is a Marxist-Leninist militant organization designed by the United States as a foreign terrorist organization, designated by the Justice Department. According to the NCRI, MECA reported roughly $35 million in foreign grants between 2017 and 2025. Investigators retraced $13.5 million in institutional donations, about two-thirds rooted through donor-advised funds and platforms that can actually obscure where the money originally came from. Foreign grants reportedly surged to $10.7 million in 2024, while many disbursements were described as quote-unquote community projects, making it difficult for the public to determine where the money ultimately went. The NCRI identified several longtime partners, it says, have documented affiliations with the radicals, along with overlapping personnel and activist relationships. Named funding sources reportedly included entities connected to George Soros' Open Society Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Funds, the Tides Foundation, and left-wing financier and Chinese communist Neville Roy Singham. The incredible evidence demands investigation. Americans deserve to know whether tax-exempt charities and wealthy left-wing foundations have indirectly financed organizations connected to foreign extremists. This is no longer about campus activism. It's about national security, transparency, and whether radical networks are using charitable institutions to undermine our country from within. And if the evidence shows that they are guilty, all of those responsible should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Meanwhile, Massachusetts Democrats are advancing legislation that would create a permanent state commission tasked with recommending Muslims for government appointments, raising fresh concerns about identity-based hiring, political favoritism, and the lingering effects of DEI in blue states. Senate Bill 2134 would establish an 11-member Muslim commission appointed by Governor Maura Healey and other state officials. The panel would advise the state government on business, healthcare, education, and other issues affecting Muslim residents. More controversially, the bill directs the commission to identify and recommend American Muslims for appointed positions throughout government, including boards and commissions. This is basically greasing the skids for the implementation of Sharia law. There is no reason why any religious group should receive a government-backed pipeline into public office, particularly when it comes to faith as antithetical to Western values as Islam. Government positions should be filled according to merit, qualifications, and service to the public, not religion, race, ethnicity, or membership in a politically favored group. The proposal comes as President Trump's administration moves to dismantle the mandate to restore equal treatment and eliminate policies that divide Americans into competing identity groups. Muslims reportedly make up roughly 2 to 3% of Massachusetts' population, but equal citizenship does not require separate commissions for every faith or demographic category. If Massachusetts wants fair hiring, it should create one standard for everyone. Establishing a religiously defined commission with influence over government appointees replaces equal opportunity with woke ideological preference. This is not only brazenly unconstitutional, but it's also un-American. This commission must be shut down by the federal government and the courts, or otherwise, if it is ultimately approved in the loony left of Massachusetts, it will further erode our society. Meanwhile, Venezuela's new government is withdrawing from the International Criminal Court, and Washington is rightly calling for another victory for national sovereignty and for President Trump's Don Roe doctrine. The State Department welcomed Caracas's announcement, saying Venezuela is joining America-led efforts to dismantle an institution it described as corrupt, politically biased, and illegitimate. The International Criminal Court spent years investigating the Maduro regime, yet produced no meaningful accountability before the former dictator was removed this past January. Now, under new leadership, Venezuela is moving closer to the United States and further from the failed international bureaucracy that protects its own power while delivering very little justice. The message is unmistakable. Trump's strategy of restoring America's strength in the Western Hemisphere is working. It's not coincidental that with the shutdown of USAID, that left-wing regimes across this hemisphere, in Chile, in Peru, in Honduras, in Colombia, are failing. The Don Roe Doctrine is not an academic slogan. It's a warning that hostile regimes, formal drug networks, and unaccountable global institutions will no longer dominate America's neighborhood without consequences. Israel has also praised Washington's tough posture. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirmed America's intention to act forcefully after a court that has targeted democratic institutions while repeatedly failing to confront genuine tyranny. The International Criminal Court's credibility suffered another blow when member states removed Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan amid misconduct allegations. For decades, global elites lectured sovereign nations while escaping accountability themselves. That era has come to an end. The idea that American citizens would be subject to some international court run by bureaucrats in The Hague is absurd, and America has never recognized the authority of the International Criminal Court. Venezuela's realignment shows that decisive American leadership can accomplish things when they set their mind out to do so. President Trump confronted a hostile regime, changed the strategic balance, and created space for a government willing to cooperate with Washington. The Don Roe Doctrine is producing results, and every nation in the hemisphere will be changed forever because of it. Meanwhile, a Portland Antifa militant has pled guilty to felony assault after attacking a federal officer during anti-ICE riots last year. Federal prosecutors say that 21-year-old Giovanni Joseph Brumbelow struck a Border Patrol Tactical Unit agent in the back of the head with a wooden stake outside Portland's Immigration Customs Enforcement facility on June 14th. Video showed that Brumbelow, dressed in black and wearing riot gear as he rushed in to disrupt the arrest of another rioter. The blow forced the agent to release the suspect and turn towards Brumbelow. Brumbelow now faces up to 20 years in prison, a $250,000 fine, and 3 years of supervised release. He has also agreed to pay restitution to the injured officer. Sentencing is now scheduled for October 19th, and frankly, they should throw the book at this communist punk. This is not, unfortunately, an isolated outburst. The attack came after a 6-month campaign against Portland ICE, the facility that produced arson, property destruction, and repeated assaults on federal personnel. Another defendant, Robert Hoops, was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison after admitting he threw a large rock at an ICE agent's head, leaving the officer bloodied. More than 30 defendants have been charged in connection with violence at the facility since June of 2025. In the pre-Trump era, these Antifa thugs would have seen their charges severely lessened or dropped completely. Those days are over. Political extremism excuses political violence no longer. Federal officials are not punching bags for masked radicals. The Justice Department must continue these prosecutions. Judges must impose serious sentences, and every citizen that tolerates mob violence must understand that law and order will ultimately prevail. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone for our final segment. A new poll shows overwhelming support for the Save America Act, legislation requiring proof of citizenship to register and photo identification to vote in federal elections. The poll, conducted by McLaughlin and Associates for the Tea Party Patriots Action Committee, found that 82% of voters agreed only American citizens should choose the president and members of Congress. More than three-quarters support requiring proof of citizenship during registration. That support, by the way, crossed party lines with 94% of Republicans, 73% of independents, and even 68% of Democrats backing that requirement. The survey also undercuts the left's claim that voter ID is an unfair or racist obstacle that somehow constitutes voter suppression. 66% of voters rejected that argument, while just 29% considered this identification requirements to be too burdensome. After hearing all of the bill's provisions, including citizenship verification, photo ID, voter roll checks, and closing registration loopholes, nearly 56% said Congress should pass it before the midterm elections. Only 34% said lawmakers should abandon the effort this year. Even the argument that married women could face difficulties failed to move most voters. The bill allows women whose current name differs from their birth records to sign a statement confirming that change. 62% called that reasonable. So President Trump is right to make this legislation a priority and to refuse to accept excuses from cowardly Senate leaders like Senator John Thune as to why it cannot be passed. The problem here, if you don't know, is the filibuster rule. The filibuster rule is not a law, it is a custom. It is a tradition. Under that tradition, a piece of legislation doesn't require 51 votes to pass the Senate. It requires 60 votes to come up for a vote. Now, I believe that there are 50 votes for the Save America Act today, plus Vice President J.D. Vance could break a tie, providing the 51st vote. But John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, essentially refuses to bring the measure to the floor or to break the filibuster. President Trump is right when he says the Democrats will abandon the filibuster rule if they retake control of the Senate. American elections should be decided by American citizens, and votes must be expected to prove who they are. This is how it has always worked in every country. America should be no exception in this regard. Democrats and media activists can manufacture excuses, but the public's not buying them. Congress should pass the Save America Act before November and give Americans the secure, trustworthy elections they are overwhelmingly demanded. Meanwhile, new financial disclosures are raising serious questions about Michigan's far-left U.S. Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed, a prominent left Democrat who waited until the day before the primary to reveal that he and his wife own valuable rental properties in 3 other countries. The filing, covering the 2025 calendar year, show that El-Sayed's wife owns a condominium in Bangalore, India, valued between $100,000 and $250,000. It reportedly generates between $5,000 and $15,000 in annual income. She also owns a rental property in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, with the same reported value and income range. In Michigan, the couple jointly owns an Ann Arbor rental property valued between $250,000 and $500,000. Failure to disclose these until after the Senate primary, claiming the process was too complicated because his wife owns the family's assets overseas. However, I say voters deserve this information before casting their votes, as El-Sayed is claimed to be a man of the people while just being, in fact, just another limousine liberal. His Democrat primary opponent, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, largely backed by the establishment, accused El-Sayed of being a millionaire and demanding greater transparency. This episode highlights a familiar pattern of a far-left politician railing against wealth and inequality while benefiting from a substantial international property portfolio and not telling the voters. The bigger issue here is transparency. Michigan voters had every right to know these assets before the primary, not at the last possible moment. Candidates seeking public trust should disclose their finances promptly, clearly, and without excuses. And El-Sayed, being connected to the UAE and India, also shows the dangerous globalist ties that this Islamist wannabe lawmaker has that every Michigan voter should know about. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?